stay in there? To reconfigure?
Scott, help me out here.
That was not addressed at this point in time. So the House version is what's in the Senate version at this point in time.
Do you plan to look at that further? And
I'm sure I'll have some testimony on it, then our caucus will work on it and decide what path to take.
You made some changes when it comes to Lake Erie and the algal problem. Do you have dollar figures as to how much have actually increased funding there?
Off the top of my head, I do not. I know there was an amendment to address that. I believe Senator Gardner offered an amendment to try and help deal with that we accepted. And we are certainly very concerned about algae problems, whether it's on the inland lakes or Lake Erie. And so from that perspective, we are continuing to try and address those.
Is the severance tax increase dead at this point, or is that something you still may address?
Severance tax increase is not in this bill.
Is it something you may still I realize you may still consider it, but are you supportive of something on a severance tax at this point in the budget?
Let me answer the question more broadly than that. We continue to look at tax reform beyond what we're doing as the small business tax cut. And we have groups working on that as well. Whether we have a chance to get it in this week or not is an open question. Whether it gets in a later version of the budget or is done as a separate bill may be dependent on what we do on Medicaid. So from those discussions, we would like to see additional tax reform. At this point, I think tax reform means we need to take a look at what we're doing and make sure it still meets the needs of the state. And there are certainly tax exemptions and adjustments in other places that may not be the most effective use of those resources at this point. So we're taking a look at those as well. And the severance tax is one of those things that's on that list. I do believe that the severance tax in the form that was produced by the governor is not likely to be in this budget. And so I think that's where the House is, and that's generally where we're at. It is not in the bill right now.
What's your assessment of how similar or dissimilar this budget is than what the governor floated at the beginning of the year?
I think we start out with the premise that the governor put forward a bold budget agenda. I don't remember any budget since I've been in the legislature that have tried to tackle as many of complex issues. And from that regard, I think a large part of the governor's baseline budget items are intact. I give you one example that hasn't had a whole lot of discussion, and that's the higher education formula. What the governor proposed is, I think, revolutionary nationwide, to actually fund higher education based on course completion and on college graduation. The nearest state close to us is Texas at 10%, and this budget calls for 50%. And so there's not a lot of discussion because most people have agreed that's a great change. It was agreed upon. And so that takes up a large number of the pages in this budget that aren't changed. So with things like that are in the budget that aren't the, some would say, shiny objects, I think the budget that the governor produced is very good, very sound, and mostly still intact. Some of the bigger ticket items, things that we needed some additional discussion on, I think in the end are going to be very close to where the governor ended up. K-12 funding is one of them. I think the final proposal, as it worked through the legislature and it gets voted on and accepted out of conference committee, is going to be remarkably similar to what the governor proposed as the framework on K-12 education. We're going to have some different ideas. We're going to do some things a little differently. We're going to implement some of the formulas a little more effectively. But that's the process. The House started with a pretty good product in what the governor proposed. The House made it better. We took a pretty good product that came out of the House, and we're going to make it even better. And then we go to conference committee, and we get to look at unintended consequences and work those things out as well. So that's just two examples. But I think the governor, in all, had put together a pretty good budget, and I think at the end of the process it's going to be largely intact.
You talked about the formula. Do you anticipate that the total pot of dollars will be bigger out of the Senate version, or are you still working within the same framework?
I would love to tell you the answer to that's yes, but it's premature until we figure out which version we're going and how we're going. I think that there is well, let me just leave it at that.
And there's also seems to be a provision.
Can I say more, Scott? No.
There also seems to be a provision in there for a sales tax exemption for drones. What's the thinking there?
It's not for drones, it's for aerospace technology and parts used in the aerospace entity. One of our largest employers, particularly in Southwest Ohio, is GE, which does a lot of aerospace. They do things like jet engines and missiles and other things as well. And so what it does is says that the products that they consume in manufacturing those things inside the state are not considered for sales tax purposes. But if you sell the item, it is sales tax purposable. And so that's the issue as to what that does. And so it's just a clarification.
Would it include drones if we get those contracts?
If they're an aerospace product, it does, because it's an aerospace exemption.
It's
Looks like there's an expansion of which roads will have a 70-mile-an-hour or 60-mile-an-hour speed limit.
Yes, that was clarification.
That was just clarification.
Yeah, what happened is my view of an interstate, and I'll just use my words, not necessarily ODOT's words, but I think the Senate's view of an interstate was 4-lane divided highways. Apparently, interstate means something different to people. You have to have the right interstate signs with the 2 colors on it. We have a lot of interstates that are 4-lane divided highways that are otherwise applicable at 65 miles an hour. And so what we did was just clarify that for them to help take away, apparently interstate definition and federal highway law means something specific.
That will expand the list of roads that were published by ODOT in the last
It could.
few weeks.
Yes.
So it could be like a U.S. highway?
Yes. If you can tell me what the difference is between US 30 running across the state and I-75 running across the state, it'd be better to drive 70 on US 30 because it's less congested. But that's the discussion, is where we went.
Would State Route 315 be considered, since it's 4-lane?
If it's 4 lanes, that's almost all in an urban area, though. If it's urbanized, it isn't covered. We're talking about rural highways.
So this could expand that then to include US 30 would.
I think US 30 is one of the prime examples, yes. I don't know of anybody who thought that originally when we did this, US 30 wasn't included.